Welcome, everyone, again. My name is Eileen Kurkoski. I'm one of the leaders of our branch. I appreciate all of you taking the time to join us on the busy Saturday. Please put your name and the place you are from with your WILPF branch in the chat. Today, we have invited two experts to talk about Gaza and Israel to better understand them and consider ways to respond to this deplorable war. It's a complex, very complex conflict going on for decades, and I just want to put it into a little wider context at this point. Vermont lawyer Charlotte Dennett, also a WILPFer, wrote in a recent Peace and Freedom magazine, which is part of WILPF, that Azerbaijan, Gaza, and the Ukraine are all connected. And that connection is about oil. And those of you who know Charlotte are aware that her father was killed in the Middle East because of oil when she was very young. She has spent decades studying and writing about it. In that article, she wrote, Henry Kissinger, a protege of Nelson Rockefeller, once said, "Who controls oil controls the world." So I ask, is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict mainly about oil and power, or much more? Or perhaps it's also about unregulated capitalism, as Chris Hedges writes about. Last time he wrote about that was November last year. Actually, it was 22. I hope our speakers expand our thinking on these issues and offers us actions that we can use to deal with the crimes against humanity that are occurring. We will start with Hani Murad, and shortly before 4 Eastern, Abby Yanow will join us. There'll be no official break, so please attend to your needs when you need to. And please keep yourself muted unless you are called upon. The speakers will talk for about 20 minutes each. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them when the speakers have shared their basic info. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Hani Murad, who not only grew up in Galilee as the oldest of a large family and then returned to the Middle East for many years when working with the UN. I just look forward so much to listening to hearing you, Hani. I look forward to not only hearing about your experiences in Galilee, but also your work in the UN and how you are now helping Boston City kids with your challenges. Welcome, Hani.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you everybody for taking some time out of your Saturday, which is, I hope, a day of rest for everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. Certainly, I'm going to be talking about my own experience growing up in Galilee and coming to the United States about, I don't know, 38 years ago now, 1985. And the time that I spent working with the United Nations, the Middle East and North Africa, and spending significant time in Gaza, certainly, to put the events of October 7th in perspective, certainly before we go into any historical background, I would say that myself and many Palestinians who I know certainly are heartbroken for what is transpiring in Gaza and Israel, certainly. And the action or the attack of Hamas on October 7th, in my view, was horrendous, terrible mistake, not only because it's bad for the Israeli, but it's also bad for Palestinians, I think. I in no way condone the actions of Hamas on October 7th, in the same manner that I will be against the harming any civilians, children, women, and the elderly anywhere in the world. But I wanted to make sure that we also don't start history from October 7th, because that will be really misleading. October 7th happened because of many, many reasons. And certainly the Palestinian or the Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli issue is not a new one. And in my view, the involvement of international and regional powers have contributed to the mess that we live in now. So to me, if we want to be honest about, why we are where we are now, we have to take a look at minimum the 18th century and up. I mean, nowadays, I hear a lot of comments about Palestinians want to destroy Israel and throw the Jews to the sea, which is an old kind of issue that had come up again. But I wanted to briefly say that throughout the, since the Middle Ages, Jews and Muslims, Jews and Arabs lived in a mutual coexistence, sometimes in harmony, sometimes were, little conflicts here and there, but nowhere in the way that we see it now. As a matter of fact, anti-Semitism did not start in the Middle East. Anti-Semitism started in Europe in the Middle Ages. And as all of us who are students of history know that the first mass expulsion was in 1290 by Edward I from England, where Jews were expelled from England based on the edict of expulsion that was issued by King Edward I. And they were not allowed to return to England until mid-17th century during the rule of Oliver Cromwell. And 1290, the Jews who left England were welcomed in Andalusia. Certainly they settled in Spain and North Africa. And a significant number was in Spain, and they were given the freedom to do whatever any inhabitant does. As a matter of fact, some of them became ministers in the Balat, which is kind of the king's, the ruler's palace. And things were not, conflict or persecution or any of that sort. And moving forward to 1492, when the Inquisition happened in Spain, Muslims and Jews were also expelled from Spain or Andalusia at the time. And Jews again were welcomed in North Africa and the Middle East, in Safed, in Jerusalem, in all of these areas. The problem became actually between the two communities in the beginning of the 20th century. And certainly the factors that are at play here certainly are economic, ideological, and as well as social/racism. And I would add to that a religious component to it. The religious component that I'm talking about is Christian Zionists, who in 1840 in England thought to revive the idea of a Jewish state, even before Herzl wrote his book about the state of the Jews or the Zionist state. And the phrase that was coined at the time in 1840 was that a land without people for a people without land. That wasn't actually a Jewish sentiment in the beginning, but it was coined by the Zionist Christian Brits in 1840s. So you have the Zionist Christian wanted, who read the Bible literally and wanted the Messiah to come. And if you read the Bible, the Messiah will not come until Israel is a state. So that's part of the support. The other part is that certainly we're aware of the anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and in Europe as a whole. And they needed to find a solution to the Jewish problem. And that's what Herzl called it, the Jewish problem. And what's better than to find a place where all the Jews can leave Europe, get rid of them from Europe, and they can go to some other place. Then Europe will be cleansed or purified from Jews. I mean, I'm specifically talking in this kind of language because I don't want to beat around the bush. That's what it is. It's racism, and it's to me at least, and people can certainly disagree with my view, and it is a factor, major factor in creating later on an issue in the Balfour Declaration. So Christian Zionism as a factor. Then you have the Zionist movement that saw the persecution of Jews in Eastern Europe, the Pogrom incidents in Ukraine and Russia, and the need as the Jewish/Zionist intellectual at the time saw that we need a refuge. We need a refuge. We need a place where Jews could feel safe and protected. And I have no problem with that, certainly. Anybody, human being, individuals, as well as communities and groups need to be safe and protected. The other thing that we need to really put on the table is the idea of colonial powers and the idea of colonial settler movements. And from its inception, as it has been noted in the writings of Jabotinsky and Begin and Herzl, Weizmann, and others, is that we are a colonial, we're going to colonize the land of Israel again. So colonial, settler colonial, to call the Zionist movement as settler colonial, in my view, is not that something that I'm imposing on that movement. It's their own words when the Zionist movement started. And plenty of quotes and resources that I can provide people if they would like. Moving forward, the economy and oil is certainly a major factor. And for Britain, those people who were in power at the time, Churchill and Balfour and Lloyd, the prime minister, wanted a station, a satellite that will protect and certainly maintain the interest of the British Empire in the Middle and Far East. And they thought of Israel to be that kind of satellite. Certainly, they will get rid of the Jews from Europe, and they also, that new entity will function as an outpost, as a satellite that will preserve, maintain, and protect the interest of the Jewish Empire with its trade and certainly the discovery of oil in the 20s in Saudi Arabia was certainly another factor. So what Eileen said earlier, that Kissinger said that who controls oil controls the world, certainly Dick Cheney was listening, and the Iraq war in major part was to occupy Iraq and control the oil resources in the Middle East, the Gulf, the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf, and Central Asia, the new states that were forming in Central Asia, which are rich in oil and gas. Moving forward, the Holocaust happens. And before the Holocaust, the Palestinians in 1910, 1915 became very concerned about the increased Jewish immigration. Initially, the way I read our own history as Palestinians, we didn't have a problem of Jews living side by side and enjoying their freedom. But when the idea became that they're going to establish a national home for the Jews on the account and in the exclusion of the local population or the native population or the indigenous people, we Palestinians, we said, oh, we have a problem now. And I think the events of 1929 and then later on the Palestinian uprising in 1936 to 39 were direct result to the increased Jewish immigration and the conditions that the British government had put in place to make sure that the Zionist movement is creating an infrastructure for a state to be created later on when the time is suitable. That all came on the expense of certainly the local populations, i.e. the Palestinians. And for that, since those days, the Palestinians have never stopped fighting for freedom, independence, and self-determination. And we can go through the 1948 catastrophe for us, where the Britain ultimately gave up on controlling the mandate land of Palestine and turned it on to basically the League of Nations or the United Nations at the time. Actually, the League of Nations was in the 20s, but the United Nations in 1947 to partition Palestine, which we as Palestinians totally rejected, and rightfully so. In 1947, we owned 92% of the land. We were about 3/4 of the population, and to divide Palestine into a Jewish state that controlled 56% of the land, versus the Arab or Palestinian state that will control 44% of the land, was totally unacceptable, because nobody in their right mind will agree to such a thing, such an unjust partition in that. So the 1948 catastrophe comes. The Jewish movement represented by Haganah, Leahy, Stern, Ergun, decided to create the State of Israel. And the Palestinian population certainly did not agree to that. And certainly the theme or the narrative that is dominant here in the West, that we, the Jews, agreed and the Palestinians did not agree because they don't want us to be there. It's more than that. Then they don't want us to be there. It's more than, in its essence, the idea of partition Palestine was an unjust one. So we can't agree to something that is totally, we see, an unjust. We have no problem with the Jewish people living side by side and enjoying the same rights and equality. But we can't agree to an exclusive state that based on a racist, in my view, a racist ideology, quote unquote, and Zionism. That's my view. And we can talk and disagree on that or discuss that later on. Moving forward, since 1948, certainly 15,000 Palestinians were killed or massacred in 1948, and a total of 70 massacres. 530 villages and towns were destroyed, and 700 to 750,000 Palestinians were forced out of their land. That's in 1948. Moving forward, in 1956, Britain, France, and Israel attack Egypt because Egypt's Nasser at the time wanted to nationalize the Suez Canal. And I don't know what business does Israel have to attack Egypt. But nonetheless, they were certainly trying maybe to be on the good side of the colonial power at the time. And then moving forward to 1967, where Israel attacked the three countries that we know, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, in their view was a preemptive strike. The Arab countries did not attack Israel in 1967. That's a historical fact. In my community, since 1948 until 1966, we lived under military occupation, military rule. Although my family stayed in what became Israel, we were supposed to enjoy citizenship and equal rights. We never did, and we never will. So my father, who needed to go to work in Haifa from my village north of Nazareth, needed to have a permit from the military governor to be able to travel from my village 40 kilometers west to Haifa to work in construction. Growing up in Israel, certainly as a Palestinian, I faced all kinds of discrimination and humiliation on a daily basis with the Israeli police and the Israeli system. And we continue to enjoy the same kind of harassment until today. My brothers and sisters who live in Galilee continue to live in Galilee, now are under surveillance. They can't express any sentiment of support to Gaza. They will be pulled for interrogation, either fired from their jobs or whatever the consequences are. Briefly, the West Bank as it is now, of course, we skipped over 1973 war and the Oslo Accord, but ultimately what exists now is one state, where you have one state, one government that really controls the whole land, and we basically have an apartheid system that is well documented by all major human rights organizations in the world, including Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, and other international ones. All of you know those things. I don't need to go in detail. But the most heartbreaking to me has been the constant attacks on Gaza since 2006. I went back to work in Palestine and the Middle East in 2004, and I left the region in 2018. During my tenure with the United Nations, I worked in Gaza for about 14 years, and I witnessed 4 major wars that have inflicted major destruction and pain. But those 4 wars, 2006, 2008, 2012, 2014, are a drop in the ocean as to the level of destruction that exists now in Gaza. In Gaza now, we have more than 22,000 accounted people who have been dead. We have about 7,000 people under the rubble, not accounted for. And they have been there for a month or 2 or 3 now. And we have over 55,000 injuries, people with different degrees of injuries. Some are very serious. We have 1.9 million people without homes, out in the open, in the fresh air, quote unquote. And Israel has managed, and that's part of the plan, to basically destroy the infrastructure in a way that Gaza is unlivable. And 2 days ago, the United Nations came with the final straw that Gaza is unlivable. If you have seen the pictures on TV, it's just a horrendous situation. that no human being can live under. And that's exactly part of the Israeli strategy, where to force the Gazan to leave what they call voluntary immigration. And they have been negotiating with many countries to take Palestinians, the least of which is Congo, that they have been in talks with Congo to take in Palestinians. But also they have also approached Australia and Canada and other countries. So, you know, ultimately the dream that Rabin and Sharon had in the 70s for Gaza to disappear into the sea, that was their dream, and those were their statements. It might become true soon because of the silence of the international community against what's happening there. And you look at the West Bank, and in the West Bank, since October 7th, things have gone 1,000 times worse. Things were terrible then, but now the settlers and the Israeli government are very emboldened. They're in the open, arrest people left and right. We have, since October 7, more than 3,000 Palestinians have been arrested in the middle of the night from their homes. And in my view, that is a form of kidnapping, because you have no reason to just go around in a rampage and collect people like that. They are not charged with anything, and they don't have to be charged because they're under military rule. The settlers have been vicious in their attacks, and for now, about 17 communities have been forced to leave their homes and leave those small communities in the peripheries because the settlers have harassed them to a degree with the help of the Israeli army that people feel totally unsafe for their lives and their kids. And in the southern Hebron area and in the Jordan Valley, 17 communities have been forced to leave. It's ethnic cleansing at its best. And for now, most of the Palestinian villages and towns and the West Bank are disconnected from one another. A lot of checkpoints, and life is becoming really unbearable in the West Bank. So I think I spoke more than I need to, but I'm happy to answer questions for you guys. So I think the more immediate thing is that we all, those people who value human life, we need to call for immediate ceasefire. We haven't talked about, the total destruction of universities, the total destruction of schools. You have a million students who lost they're going to lose basically their education, a whole generation that is losing their education in Gaza. And there is no end in sight because we in the United States have decided that genocide of this kind is okay with us. Why? Because they are Palestinian. If they weren't Palestinians, if they weren't black and brown, we will not allow this to happen. But as long as, they're not like us, who cares? We did this in Afghanistan, we did this in Iraq, and we'll do it in Palestine. We, the United States, are directly responsible for what is going on in Gaza. We manufacture the weapons, the 2,000-pound bombs, we manufacture them in here, we pay for them in here, and we ship them there to be dropped by our F-16 and F-35s on men, children, and elderly. If the Israeli government are so good in taken out Hamas leadership like they did in Beirut, then why are they dropping 2,000 bombs on neighborhoods? That's my question. Why are we killing civilians if we are so sophisticated in being able to take somebody in Beirut neighborhood by attacking exactly the apartment that they were meeting in? In any case, ultimately, I think the Israeli government had made sure that the Oslo Accord and the idea of having a two-state solution have been dead for a while because there was the Israeli government expansion and settler supporting policy have made it impossible to have a two states. I'm going to stop here and will be happy to hear from you and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hani. Your message is coming across clear and so very descriptive of a terrible, deplorable situation. And thank you for the history. I would love to get maybe your resources written in the chat. And please, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat. I would like to ask a telltale question, because when I met you, Hani, when I was picking up books at your house, books that your wife wrote, the Ida in the Middle, about a Palestinian American girl. I was hoping you could share a little bit about how you are helping inner city kids with their challenges. And some of these inner city Boston kids are immigrants like yourself, like many others who are coming from many countries, who have been damaged badly by seeing some horrific things. Tell me a little bit of how that works. I can't think of a better person to work with them than a therapist who knows this in a cellular way.
Thank you, Eileen. Certainly, my work with Boston children and Boston public schools and families, certainly we have challenges that run the gamut, really. Certainly, inner city or poverty and not as safe as we would like them neighborhoods, but also homeless children who are of a migrant family who come to us with migrant families that are really basically been traumatized with a journey from their homeland, whatever that is, could be El Salvador, Guatemala, Central America, Haiti. I mean, these are traumatized kids. Many of them have seen things that no child should see, and reminds me of the kids in Gaza as well, where they have lived under an open air prison, basically, with no prospect, no future. The only thing that is maybe of hope here is that we in Boston, we are really highlight issues of fighting racism. We declare ourselves as an anti-racist school system, and we fight for not equality only, but equity, which is very different. Equality is good, but equity is even better. So we come from the lens of equity and anti-racist ideology or methodology of working with students. And within that, we take into account their background, their culture, their experience, their trauma, their poverty, racism that exists in society. And we also try to work to break down the structures that exist that maintain such a system of inequality and inequity. So yeah, my work with teenagers and children who have had a difficult experience always I come to it from the lens of equity and the lens of anti-racist methodology, and preserving really safety, security, that because without safety and security, you can't do much. Safety, security, and dignity, most important, dignity to those kids, that their culture is valued. They don't need to forget their language. On the contrary, we want to encourage them to maintain their language, their native language, and we want them to add to it other skills like, English language skills, or other educational learning skills. But we want them to feel proud of who they are, and we want to make sure that they are welcomed, and that's not an easy task, certainly.
Thank you for that. I have a question about your UN experiences. Can you share some of your achievements and perhaps disappointments with your work when you were, doing your work for the UN in the Middle East?
Yeah, it's really hard to summarize it in many ways, because the disappointments are much more than the achievements in many ways. But certainly, I mean, the achievement is that we tried to provide, under very difficult conditions, at least some sense of normalcy to grow up in a quote unquote acceptable, safe environment, which is really hard to do when you are under military occupation in Gaza, the West Bank, or you are in a civil war in Syria, Yemen, or Libya, and when you are in a refugee camp in Somalia, starving. And the disappointment is that all of these major challenges, problems, they are solvable. They are solvable. That's the major frustration, disappointment. It's a matter of policy. It's a matter of the member states of the United Nations deciding that they want to help these communities. On the contrary, many of these communities, the problems are a direct consequence of the policies of the power countries in the world. So to try to help the families and children in these areas, you give them aid, you try to give them education, but it's a political problem. It's not an economic problem. If the political issues are resolved and there is a genuine interest from the superpowers to do something, many of these problems will not even exist. So, like, you want to be empathetic, certainly, and you want to be helpful, but deep inside of you, you know that these are manufactured problems that directly impact the livelihood and the lives and futures and health and well-being and education of these poor people. 70% of Gaza or more are refugees from towns and villages around Gaza. They did not come from Mars.
Yeah.
And you talk about the same thing in other countries where we, as the United States, where we talk a good talk in terms of values and freedom and democracy, but we don't practice that in actual reality in other countries. Yeah. Our history is full of supporting dictators to oppress their people, give them the resources and the means to do that, or even worse, when a democratically elected government does not see eye to eye with our own foreign policy, we are enabling or supporting or plotting coups to change the regimes, like we did in Iran in 1953, and we did in Chile, and we did last year in Pakistan. We are still in business. We did this in Pakistan last year. We brought back a corrupt Nawaz Sharif and the military to be in power.
Yeah.
And the elected person is sitting in jail, Imran Khan.
Mm-hmm.
So the United Nations is really the collection of the member states, and the member states, without the Security Council, they can't do much, because any General Assembly resolution has no teeth until the Security Council approves that. And if you have 5 powers who have a veto power, for some reason, I don't know why they chose those 5, but whatever it is, that's the outcome of World War II and the colonial powers. Then you can have good heart and good intentions, but really.
Yeah. Okay, we have a number of questions coming up from the other folks here. So I'm going to ask the first one. When did Palestine disappear from the maps of the Middle East? It was just that one Netanyahu thing, presentation at the UN. I believe the answer to that is, that was 2 weeks before the October 7th. Do you remember that he presented a map to the?
Well, that was in his General Assembly. Like every year
Yep.
In September, you have the General Assembly. All the heads of state are invited for a week of speeches and talks, and he presented that map. But I think long before that, certainly in the Israeli books, I was educated in the Israeli books. I mean, school system, grown up in the 60s and 70s. We never talked about Palestine.
No.
Actually, they prevent us from calling us Palestinians. They call us Israeli Arabs.
Why?
Which is another strategy to fragment a society. You call them different groups, fragmented groups, as they have no connection to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another topic.
Boy, I'll say. Another question. Oh, nice comment here. You want to hear this. Thank you for your history, so thorough and succinct, and also for the clear statement about the U.S. as a source of the weapons being used by Israel now. Please do thank your wife, Nora, for the Ida in the Middle books. For those who don't know, Nora's book is on the finalist, Jane Addams' list, which is Jane Addams was pretty much our founder of WILPF. And we have a book competition every year, and she's one of the top contenders. Okay, I'd like to read my questions to Hani. Ginger Harris, you're on. Go ahead. Oops.
Okay. Right. I have an indelicate question, but I'll start with, I listened to Rami Khouri being interviewed by Brianna Joy Gray yesterday or 2 days ago. And he said that Palestinians now number around 13 million. I think you may have said 14 million. There were only 1.5 million Palestinians in 1948. Half of them were thrown out of the country, out of Israel, Palestine. So 750,000 stayed in Palestine. The others were refugees. And now those refugees number about 6 million. And, from 750,000 to 6 million. Let's see. There was a study, said Rami Khouri, done by Palestinian and other scholars showing that there's plenty of room to let many of the refugees back in, at least the old people and the younger people who might go to a Palestinian state or whatever they negotiate. So it's not a question, he said, of mechanics. It's a question of humanity. And given your own background of one of 11 children, and I must say also that my granddaughter's cousin, who is Jewish, went to Israel for a couple of years, married an American Jew there, and they came back here and announced that they wanted to have at least 4 children. So this is a question about population increase. And I personally always, when I would see pictures of Palestine, Israel, they looked like the desert to me. I grew up in Missouri, a lot of fauna, flora. So I always wondered how people could live in, make a living in that kind of environment. But I also assumed that not many people were living there. I didn't know these statistics at the time. Anyway, so I'm wondering if you think that the population issue, the birth rate issue, will be a problem in the future in terms of settling the issue of will it be a 1-state, 2-state, whichever one they choose, how will the population increases affect the viability of that of a possible solution, a long-term solution? That's my indelicate question.
Thank you for your question. I'm honestly looking at the resources of the country. I think now we have living in there about 13 million inside, like between Jews and Palestinians, 13 million or so, 14 million maybe. Not taking into account the refugees outside historic Palestine or the land of Israel. And I never thought that demographic or population crowdedness or being crowded or no room. I think the driving force why we are here is because of ideology. And the Israelis are keen on keeping the demographic balance, meaning Jerusalem city, they will not allow the Palestinian population to grow beyond 35%. So they have all kinds of schemes to make sure that they have majority in the city. I don't think there's plenty of room for another 10 million people in the country. That's not the issue, I think, in my view. My issue that I think the most important thing is that the Israeli system, the Israeli structure, the Israeli government, the movement, the ideology is that we want to be a Jewish state. And within that Jewish state, we're going to have a democratic, but the democratic state requires that we are a majority. And that's not democratic. You can't decide that you're going to have a democratic state and say, I'm going to make sure that we, the green people, we're going to be the majority no matter what. So I don't think the real issue here is demography and being crowded, and there is no room. There is plenty of room, and there's plenty of resources. And we did not talk about that. Big part of the war on Gaza in the ferocity and brutality that it is that they want to control the gas fields off the shore of Gaza that is going to be about $1 trillion or more. And the other incentive or the other plan that they have in mind is that they want to dig another canal to compete with the Suez Canal from Aqaba or from Eilat through Gaza to the Mediterranean. So yes, Hamas did something awful on the 7th, but the plans have been there way before the October 7th on how to get Gaza to disappear. I mean, the population of Gaza to disappear. So I think I grew up there. I know the country better than I know Boston. And there's plenty of room for all the refugees to come back. And believe me, many of them probably will not come back because they have lives that have established somewhere else. Those who come back are going to be the refugee camps in Lebanon where people live like animals, basically. And, a few other people. But why not all Jewish people live in Israel, right? You have more Jews living in the United States than they live in Israel.
Sure.
They claim that it's the state for the Jews. Well, some people don't want to live in Israel.
Hani, we have to move on a little faster. We're
Sure.
wrapping up. But I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't catch this earlier. Would you succinctly answer this question? Would you please remind us of what the Balfour Statement was meant to address?
The Balfour Statement meant to His Majesty the King government is going to facilitate the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine for as Jewish state and as a homeland, but also that should not prejudice the local population or the Jewish population living somewhere else, basically. But in its essence, there is no mention of Palestinians there. The mention is of other than Jews, the others. There are the Jews and there are the others, kind of thing. And that His Majesty the King is going to do whatever it can to create that entity.
Okay, thank you. This is from Jane Brown. She's listed under my name. What would end the war? How could Netanyahu be removed from office? Why is Biden backing Netanyahu? How about that? Can you do that succinctly? I doubt it.
Yeah, it's a very big thing. But ending the war requires what is going to be the day after. And the day after, we're not going to go back to Palestinians being under siege for 17 years. It's going to require the Israelis to adopt maybe a basic value, which is human beings are equal, to have equal rights, either within their own state, sovereign, 2 states, or with 1 state. And as I said earlier, the prospect of 2 states is gone because there's nothing left to talk about for 2 states. The infrastructure in the West Bank has created such a facts on the grounds that you can't go beyond them with the settlements. There are 700,000 settlers that control 70% or more of the West Bank. There's nothing left to talk about. And Gaza is Gaza. So that's one. And why Biden? Biden, I think, is one of the kind of old-fashioned politicians who have bought the Israeli narrative, the Zionist narrative, since he ran for elected office. And he believes in the Zionist project. That's one. And the other thing is that you have a lot of his advisors are Zionists. So who controls the policy making in the State Departments are Zionists. Who controls the White House chief staff and down? Zionists. So if you put potatoes in your pot and you are cooking, you're not going to expect to have fish once the cooking time is over. You're going to have potatoes.
Thank you. Okay, Samantha Turner, like white anti-racist allies and advocates groups and movements in the U.S., are there Jewish Israeli ally organizations?
Yeah, very few. I mean, certainly we have Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, those are the major two that there is Rabbis for Human Rights. But the tragedy is that the Israeli peace movement has disappeared. Last election, Meretz did not make it the Meretz is the Israeli human rights party, like, they're decent Israelis, I guess, in my view. They did not even make it to they don't have one representative now. So the political reality in Israel, the political map in Israel has moved so far to the right that Netanyahu is like centrist now. Netanyahu and Palin and those guys who are really racist fascists are almost central, because you have Ben Gvir, Smotrich in the right, and other ones who really wants to kill everybody. So there are friends of peace now, but they are not. I don't see them as being very active in the States anymore.
I would like to take one message from someone with their hand up in their window. Jan Korteman went to the West Bank 2 years ago, and I think she may have a worthwhile comment, possibly a question. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eileen, and thank you so much for this presentation, Hani. It's been very, very, very helpful. One of the things that I've always been impressed with is the resistance movement in Palestine. It's amazing. It's for when you think about what people go through, from a very young age, and what the resistance movement is just so. They're really amazing. They're really a model. One of the things I'd like to know more about is the political situation within Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. I know there haven't been elections for some time. Are average people calling for elections? Has there been any, and I know you've done a lot of work with the UN, was there any efforts on part of any outside organizations to help with get elections going? I mean, can you just fill us in a little bit more about the internal politics? Because like I said, the resistance is very powerful, but I'd really like to know more about what the politics is like.
Thank you for this question, Jan, certainly. And thank you for visiting the West Bank. I wish more of us will go and visit, because once you go and visit, it's life-changing. Like Peter Beinart said, I was a very astonished, strong Zionist, and I went to the West Bank, and it's like, wow, I can't be Zionist anymore. But the thing is that I think that the Palestinian political scene is in flux all the time because of internal and external factors that are really intertwined. Certainly, the Oslo Accord had people. I mean, I visited there in the 90s because I go every year to visit my family. And then in the 2004, I lived for 15 years there again. But people were very hopeful. People were looking forward to a new day, a bright future. You have 85% of the Palestinian population supporting strongly the two-state solution and the Oslo Accord. But then over time, people saw that this was all a big facade, big smoke and mirror, where the Palestinian Authority was in actual a subcontractor for the Israeli government to do security services, basically, for the Israeli government. And they lost credibility big time. And nowadays, they have no credibility whatsoever in the Palestinian community. Certainly, the Palestinian Authority with the Israelis had collaborated closely to suppress all of the infrastructure and the institutions for other Palestinian political parties, including the traditional ones, PFLP, DFLP, and certainly Hamas Islamic Jihad in the West Bank. And now, you know, most Palestinians in the resistance are really either support, you know, Hamas and others, because in their view, as an oppressed person, if you see somebody standing up for your oppressor, it doesn't matter what they do, you're going to be emotionally drawn to support them. And I think Palestinian civil society all want free and fair elections, and they call for it. The problem is that it's not in Israel interest, nor in the Palestinian Authority interest, because they're both going to lose. So they don't want it. So they come up with all kinds of excuses. One fact that I should mention is that after the Oslo Accord, the European and the Americans came to the Palestinian Authority initially, and they said, listen, we're calling for two states, but you are not ready for it. You need to build institutions. So the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people, civil society, embarked on this big, huge task of building institutions, being that education, legal, social, economic, and all that, with the constraints of the Israeli occupation, nonetheless. And by 2012, the European Union and the United Nations made a survey and like an accounting or auditing, and they said, we have the right institutions, Palestinians are ready for self-governing, and they're ready for state. And that was wonderful, but it fell on deaf ears, because Israel was interested, so the US is not interested, and then the whole project fell.
Oh.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I am so sorry that other people's questions have not been responded to. Is it at all possible, Hani, that you could stay on and answer the questions? Because
sorry.
Abby, our next speaker, is here. And
Sure.
I'd very much like to give her the opportunity to have her presentation. And thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Very
you.
enlightening. It certainly opened my eyes to some things I wasn't aware of. And I still have some more reading and checking to do. Thanks to you for all you offered.
Thank you. You're welcome, and I'll be happy to stay on and help to clarify some of the things.
Great, thank you. Hello, Abby, welcome. I must
Hi.
say, I must say you wanted your introduction, your write-up in the promo very succinct. So I'm going to depend on you to add anything further, but it's a pleasure that you're coming here. And just to remind others that you're a fellow peace activist who co-chairs the Israel-Gaza campaign of the Mass Peace Action Group. I certainly have been looking forward to your presentation, Abby, and to learn more about your work with with MAPA. So you're on, and thank you.
Thank you,
And
Eileen.
Ellen, yeah, help with the PowerPoint, Ellen.
I can do that from here, actually. I have permission from here. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Great to see you all. I, of course, know WILPF from years ago from Nancy Wren
Oh, yeah.
and Claire Goslin, and there's another woman whose name I forget. And Susan Mirsky is here, and Susan works with us. Susan, I don't see your face, but she knows all about what we're doing in MAPA. So I prepared there she is. Hi. I prepared a slide deck for you with some images so you can see. So Ellen asked me to talk about what MAPA is doing. And we've been very, very active. We've been meeting every week since, October 7th, right? Sort of in crisis mode. And I am distraught that we haven't achieved a ceasefire yet. I'm just totally beside myself. And on October 14th, I said to Cole, do you think that we're not going to have a ceasefire within 1 week? And right? And here we are 3 months. It's so distressing and depressing. So I'm going to share my screen. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
So what have we been working on? We have been supporting these billboard trucks, and Susan and I were there. Susan Mirsky and I were there at Representative Auchincloss' office in Newton. The trucks made the rounds from Connecticut and Massachusetts to the representatives' offices. So they told us to meet at Auchincloss' office. We went there, and you can see that we went and met the truck. There's more than one truck going around. So there's a truck pulling a trailer, and you can see the images here. Here's another one. And if you would like to support this effort to pay for the drivers, to pay to rent the truck, then I put this information here, which I'm happy to pop into chat. So they need money to cover that. The other activities they're doing, there's a bunch of us writing letters. I've written many letters, 15, 20 letters to the Boston Globe, the Guardian, the New York Times. We just need people to be writing letters and to challenge the media narrative, the mainstream narrative that is just not getting it right, as I think you all know, right? And then writing letters to the media when we see something that we consider is misrepresenting the situation. So I've written to 60 Minutes and BBC, and they need to hear from us. So that's what we're active doing. We've been holding rallies and vigils. So these are my friends in Maynard. I went out to join them. This was their very first vigil. Bravo to them. And then that's me in Watertown. So on December 18th, we had a vigil, silent vigil, and then 2 people spoke, myself and Asaf Kfouri. And we had, I don't know, 100 people. Susan, you were there, weren't you? I think Susan Mirsky was there. And then this is from Northampton. And they had something, this can't be right, Northampton to Springfield. That seems like a long way to me. But anyway, they had this train of people walking from one city to another with their banners, which was really cool. So that's something else we're involved in. And of course, everyone is welcome to join in any town at all. Auchincloss is not my representative, but I went anyway because it's close to me. I'm in Watertown. we can be writing, we do, and you could do also, which is writing letters of support to elected officials who get, who speak out and get hit on the head for speaking out, like Rashida Tlaib. And you all know that she was censured by the House. I mean, that, right? She got censured by them. And so we wrote to support her. And Diana Presley, who was just outspoken on this issue, she's the most liberal of the Massachusetts legislators. And so it's important for us to write and support her. We call and email our senators and representatives, as I said, and we go to their offices. And Susan Mirsky has gone many times to Representative Auchincloss's office. In fact, we were there. I was there twice with that group. We also host webinars. So this is upcoming. This is on Monday. If you're not on, I mean, you can join the MAPA list, but this is this Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. I imagine that, I think, Hani, I think you mentioned Peter, or somebody, Eileen maybe mentioned Peter Beinart. So he's going to talk about understanding the horror in Israel-Palestine. And all of us activists understand that history did not start on October 7th. And Hani was speaking to this. There's a long history from, if you say the Balfour Declaration, 1917, the State of Israel, 1948, the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, 1967. So there's a long history and a context to the Hamas attack, the horrendous attack on October 7th. We have another one. This is pretty exciting. Jihad Abu Salim is going to be speaking to us on January 25th. I don't yet have the publicity for that, but if you get on the MAPA mailing list, you'll get that. He's the executive director of the Jerusalem Fund, which is in Washington, D.C. And last month we had Kenneth Roth. I'm sure you all know him. For 30 years, he was the executive director of Human Rights Watch. He's now a professor at Princeton and also at the Carr Center at the Harvard Kennedy School. And I've been contacting, I and the committee, the team have been contacting people to speak on webinars. Our most, sort of recent and urgent action is to take action about the fact that the U.S. is, these manufacturers, weapons manufacturers, are violating the Leahy Law. So for one thing, we're protesting at the weapons manufacturers' sites, like Raytheon, L3 Harris is near Northampton. People have been protesting at Elbit in Cambridge, although Elbit is Israeli owned, it's not a US company, but we are protesting the US weapons manufacturers, that they are manufacturing weapons that are being used in the slaughter in Gaza. And so we have, these are people you can see on December 31st who were protesting in Boston on Park Street. There's Susan right there. Susan, there you are. And then this was in Northampton at L3 Harris, which is another weapons manufacturer. That was October 25th. So the campaign, as I said, is it's to confront those military contractors located in Massachusetts. The immediate urgent need is to send a letter to the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Levy. I sent my letter yesterday, and they need letters. I mean, today's Saturday. They need letters there by Monday, but if you can get it by Tuesday, that would be great, which is to urge him to enforce the Leahy Law by closing the military contractor facilities until their companies cease providing weapons to Israel. And I'm going to provide you the address here, and I'll also put it in the chat. So the thing is that they don't have an email address. You actually need to send it by snail mail. I'll put that in chat. You can join the MAPA Gaza campaign. you can follow, I mean, you can join, you already know about JVP, and if not now, which Hani mentioned, you can join the MAPA campaign. I'll put the address in the chat. I'm in Watertown, and so on January 21st, we're having a silent standout in Watertown Square from 1 to 2, and then we're having a commemoration of lives lost. You know, I kind of designed this thing because I just thought, I'm in grief. I think many of us are grieving, and I just think we need to do that in public to honor the people who've been killed. So that's from 2:30 to 3:30. We have a speaker who is Nidal Alazarek, who is the executive director of 143.org, which works on water, food, health, and such. And we're going to have some poems. We're going to be reading a few poems. This is the, that's the publicity. So that's the main piece. If there's something else like.
I'm sorry, Abby, please put out the promo, that last slide. Again, I'm making copies and doing snapshots. That's it. Just enlarge it just a tiny bit if you can.
I can also put it in the chat, Eileen.
Got it. I got it. Thank you. It has more information. That's what I was looking for. Whoa, I know I've been out at Jake Auchincloss's office many a time. You know, hundreds of people showed up a couple times, and 50, and then we've had things inside. Most of them, I have to admit, were designed and set up by Sue Mirsky. She's been on him. Jane Brown in our group of letter writings has literally written to Jake almost weekly for the past 4 months. And it's like banging your head sometimes against the wall. So I am so pleased that these other activities are going on, and we'll certainly focus some of our letter writing very differently, add more things because you've provided that. Does anybody have any questions specifically for Abby? Is that Linda? You've got to unmute.
Okay. You referred Abby. Hi. I want to say hello, of course.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. What is the Leahy Law?
Oh, yes. Hold on once.
They're Leahy, I'm sure, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, hold on a second. I'm just putting this information in the chat.
Okay.
So the Leahy Law says that when the United States provides weapons to other countries, they cannot be used for anything that violates human rights violations or international law. And I mean, it's not being enforced very well.
Putting it mildly, yeah. Thank you. So it's
Sure.
I'll look it up too. Thank you.
The day of grief, I have to admit, is so needed. I've been an activist for a while now, and just before Christmas, I had a total meltdown. Literally couldn't get out of bed for over a day, out of an extreme low. And it was mostly about the kids. At that time, there were 6,000 kids reported killed in Gaza. I was devastated. It's now 10,000 probably. And as Hani mentioned, there's still so many under rubble. We don't know where they are. So there's something better about grieving with others. And I must say, the Watertown group does that beautifully for the Hiroshima Nagasaki Day commemorances every single year. It's important, and I can't thank you enough for being part of this, Abby.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions for Hani, who has stayed to wait to see if there are more questions?
Did you answer the ones that were in the emails? I'm sorry, the chat, Hani?
Ginger has
Good
her
morning.
hand raised.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Go for it, Ginger.
Well, my question is based on reaction from a dear friend who is well, I sent her the film about the comparison between South African apartheid and Israeli apartheid. And she wrote me back a fairly long letter saying why they weren't parallel or certainly weren't the same. And I'd like to be able to submit it. I could read it, but it's longer than you all probably want to listen to. I could send it to somebody and to like Abby, Hani, or anybody on this Zoom, and find out how other people think about her reaction. And by the way, she considers herself African American, so she doesn't know everything about South Africa, but she probably knew more than I did. So I'm just putting that out there. I could read it to you, but it's a page. If nobody else has questions, and if everybody, I guess, if anybody wants to stay.
Yeah, Jan Corderman wrote, South Africa is filing a case at the International Criminal Court next week. Do you think that will make a difference? Hani, do you have an answer to that?
Good question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have my personal take is just about time, you know.
Yeah.
I think these international institutions that we, as a human community globally, have created for people to have some, some format or some place to go when they feel injustice, have been blocked, in front of the Palestinians for many years. Every time the Palestinians want to go to the High Court of Justice, International High Court of Justice, or whatever, the US and Israel and a few other countries block that, and then they threaten to cut aid and do this and do that. And so I think it's about time. I mean, this is kind of appropriate to me, and should have been done long time ago. Israel has been connecting. Yesterday, the former prosecutor from Lahi, the Spanish guy, was interviewed on Al Jazeera, and he said, yes, the South African, but a case against for supporting genocide should have been done a long time ago in the West Bank, because what Israel is doing in the West Bank is a genocide, let alone after the 7th in Gaza. So I hope they will go through with it, and I hope they will, whoever, the Srebrenica or whoever other criminals in Sudan or others than Sudan, face justice. I mean, that's the way it should be. We don't create these institutions as a trophy and as a just a mantle to put on the shelf. They should be active, and they should be implemented. So I thank South Africa.
Ellen, I'm so glad you're filling up to talk. This is Ellen Mass. Please ask your question.
Thank you. I wanted to just, rather than a question, I wanted to corroborate Hani's description of his life in Palestine, in and out. And to say when I was I lived there a year in 68, actually 68, 69, when my former husband taught at the Hebrew University in Spanish. And so he even had a little class at our apartment on the Sephardic. He was a real linguist in every way. But we traveled throughout the area, and everything you said is so, so true in my experience. You're bringing back these memories that are very powerful, because at that time they were keeping the lid on. Even though it was very unequal, you could feel the boiling, but the lid was still on. Even when we went out to Ramallah, made friends with a shopkeeper who took us out into the field, and the only way he could express his unhappiness was to keep apologizing because the electricity, it kept going off, and he would explain, when the water came on, there was tremendous limitation, and he was apologizing. That was all we got. And then when we traveled down to Gaza, and we were there on the beach, in the market with the eels and the oranges all laid out beautifully in the market, I looked up, and a house was the smoke and wood were going up into the air. And do you know, people did not even look up. They just kept shopping. They were so accustomed to houses being blown up. And this is 68, 69, when Moshe Dayan was the big hero. So everything was Dayan. Eventually, we became a little more intimate with the real situation when the editor of the university student newspaper killed himself. So there was the debate, can he be buried in a Jewish cemetery? But people were really murmuring among themselves that as a North African editor, he couldn't take it. So I just wanted to thank you. I probably don't want to relive some of the memories, but some of the memories are very, very good. They were beautiful people. And we were sympathetic even at that time. We did not speak out. They were going to do poetry on the radio, old Arab Sephardic poetry, and the Israelis took it out. We practiced and practiced. I was going to read one of the verses, and we couldn't do it. They took it out at the last minute. They took that program out. So we saw the Yemenites when we first came in. They sat in another room, the Aliyah. They wanted the white people like us to make Aliyah and to be the citizens. And the Yemenite Jews were not, you could see that they were not handled the same as we were. So I saw it firsthand, and I'm so glad to hear you're here and you're sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I can tell you that my village did not have electricity or a paved road to connect it to the outside world until the mid-70s. So in the winter, we were disconnected from the world, actually, because it's only like a valley farming land, and it's mud, and you can't travel with mud. No. So we were disconnected for a few months from the outside world. Yeah. And growing up, we didn't have electricity. So, the old-fashioned kind of light that you put kerosene in. So that's the way we studied, on a kerosene light, small kerosene light.
Mm-hmm. And that's
in Israel proper, in Galilee, near Nazareth.
Uh-huh.
But Jewish communities has all the amenities and services, and we had nothing.
And I didn't hear any hopefulness when we were there for a whole year. All I know is that we sat in there to learn Hebrew with the Arabs, and they were making fun of the teacher. And I was glad they were making fun of the teacher because they had to learn Hebrew, sit there, and they were laughing. And I thought,
Eileen, can I add one or two things?
Sure, I'm done.
Please
Thank you.
do, Abby, absolutely.
Thank you. So I think Ellen mentioned the South Africa, and I think I mentioned earlier that, as you know, South Africa has called the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, to make a determination of that what Israel doing in Gaza is genocide. It would be great if WILPF could sign on as an organization if you haven't done so already. And I've put that link, Eileen, in the chat. So you sign on as an organization. And then what I also put in was an action page for you as individuals. That was the second thing I put there. And then there's information about the South Africa initiative. Oh, super, Tina, thank you. Bravo. Then I put some information for the Black Alliance for Peace about South Africa. Thanks.
Great job. Thank you. Susan Mirsky, I think you had a question or comment. Where did you go?
Here I am.
Great. You go, lady.
Just, as you talk about the South African effort, I would wonder if it does put pressure on US. I don't know if it puts that much pressure on Israel, but I wonder if it's put some pressure on the US, as much as we don't like to think of anything about the UN that has control over us. But what I wanted really to mention was the Bernie Sanders bill, which I had mentioned before, and that wherever people are in this audience, whatever state you are in, to please get your senators to sign on and co-sponsor that bill, because that is going to be taken up right away. So it's it's immediate.
The ceasefire bill. The Sanders is mostly ceasefire.
No, that has to do with stopping the aid.
Stopping.
But we can put the information of the Bernie Sanders bill in the chat. So I just wanted to say, please do that. That's it.
Susan, I'll copy that in here. The Bernie Sanders bill is it's a bit long what I took. So it's a call for the Senate to hold a vote and a debate on US complicity in Israeli human rights abuse against Palestinians. And if the Senate passes that, then they would be required to produce a report that would go to Congress, and then Congress would do whatever they see fit to do with that report.
But they have to act on it, and that will go right away. So this is immediate.
Yeah, this is a 502B bill, resolution bill, and I have sent out letters on this already, and I believe in it. I think Paul Shannon's picking up and has discussed it with his group, anti-Raytheon group, Susan. I haven't got back with him. I think it was discussed Wednesday.
Yes,
So,
we're going to be doing a petition that we'll be handing out at those standouts that I put in the chat. So we do them every once in a while. The next one is on the 17th, Harvard Square. Please come join us. But we're going to be gathering those. And so you can sign on in terms of, with that, the 502B, we have, you can sign on also in support of that as an organization, but also individually.
what I like about this bill is it may take a while to go through the process, the legislative process, but if it can get some real support, it'll be not only good, hopefully good, and for Gaza, but for Ukraine and any further actions. It's been long needed. And who knows, maybe it will make a difference. Anybody else have a question or comment at this point? Oh, Susan, you have more. I'm sorry.
I can barely talk, but I just want to say, Hani, that your description of the history of all of this has been so good. I hope that this has been recorded, and I want to listen to it again because it was clear. It made so much sense. So thank you very much for that and for all that you have been doing and all that you continue to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share something sad that I didn't have the chance to say it, but during this war, I lost scores of people that I worked with in Gaza. And the last one was I received a letter from the United Nations on December 22nd, where my friend was killed with his family, 7 people in one family. In an apartment that they lived in, and it was bombed, and the whole family was totally annihilated. I went to his oldest son wedding when I was there, and he was killed with them as well. 7 people in one shot, but that wasn't the first one of my colleagues and friends that were killed from the United Nations.
My heart goes out to you, Hani. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Just to say that it's really it's not intellectual for me anymore. We have lost many people we love and know in Gaza.
And that's why I'm going to keep on fighting, and I hope all of us do. In whatever way and capacity we can, and not everyone can get out every day, but maybe a letter a week or every couple of days, or an email to a congressperson. Just, take 15 minutes and just do it. And if you have to put it in your phone or some calendar to remind yourself, which is what I do, do it. It makes me not get depressed because I'm actually doing something. And so I'm recommending that.
That's a doctor's prescription, actually.
Well, I
So-
come from that field.
Yeah, exactly. So, actually, the inhumanity is so horrendous and the load is so heavy that you have to be active physically, honestly. You have to go out and as well as, mentally. Otherwise, I mean, I would have gone crazy by now if I didn't have some outlets.
Well, that's the reason that I really wanted Abby to come, because of the high level of activity they're doing at Israel-Gaza Committee out of MAPA.
Wonderful.
And
Yeah,
people
thank you,
who
Abby.
really want to get involved with a lot of high level constant activity, join with Abby and the MAPA group as well as ours. We do our Saturday letter writing. So people who want to sit and really think and deliberate over a really good letter, some of these legislators prefer the handwritten personal type of letter. So that's what we do every Saturday, except when we have something like this, which is our regular Boston chapter meeting once a month on the first Saturday of the month.
Mm-hmm. Jane is a master or mistress of handwritten letters. I've always been impressed with that, and I think it has made an impact on the folks she sends to. A lot of people are bidding goodbye. I do want you to look at the chat. They really appreciate both of you as speakers, yeah, Hani and Abby. I hope you're reading these. They're great.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank
Bravo
you.
to Will. Thank you, Hani.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you all for giving us the time and really being here and not only listening, but contributing to the discussion, because your life experience is, very valuable to me as well. And I speak for all Palestinians. I'm sure that we all appreciate your support and your effort and really direct involvement in calling for justice and peace.